Okay, so excellent. Diane, I see you're ready, you're set up to start the presentation. So I just want to introduce very briefly Diane Isaacson, a longtime RFA member, who is going to give us our next presentation. All right, Diane, over to you.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me okay?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I can, yes.
Just great.
Awesome. So Tommy and I spoke a little bit about some of the potential topics. I'm super excited this is my first time attending a meeting. I travel a lot, and so I could never line up my schedule. So thank you so much for a Zoom presentation that allows me to hop in.
Turn that down. I just come in here.
I'm going to talk a little bit today about Lineage Society applications. I am a member of many societies. I'm going to base our conversation around DAR. I am currently a registrar of my chapter, and so that role has me processing applications. So it's something sort of top of mind for me. I'm of course going to base it on my Reynolds connections, but a lot of what I talk about is going to apply to other lineage societies. DAR is often seen as one of the most difficult societies to join. So I'm certainly happy to talk and answer a few questions about some of the other ones, like the Winthrop Society or the Mayflower or any of those other. But basically, lineage societies typically are based on the participation in a particular event of an individual from whom you descend or have some kind of relationship to. So a couple of things to keep in mind: that lineage societies are not historical societies, although they are a fantastic and often overlooked resource for your genealogical research. And I'll show you an example a little bit later. All of the records in the DAR genealogical record system relate only to approved member applications. So don't get discouraged if you don't find a connection. It's just that nobody that you're descended from or related to has ever applied for that person. The process is typically the same for a new or a supplemental application. And what that means is, in order to join, you have to prove a connection to somebody. And many of the societies allow you to then also add additional ancestors that you are related to. All of the societies I've ever worked with prioritize new member applications over supplementals. In the DAR, for instance, they're running about 4 to 8 weeks for approval of new members. I'm still waiting 18 months for supplementals that I've submitted. So it's kind of a long haul for that. If for DAR, other societies may be different. And leverage the programs that are available. There are local registrars. There are also many other ways to streamline, particularly the process for new members who are descendant from previous members. Just for example, the records DAR holds over 900,000 records just for the members online, and that's their entire application. So anyone related in between. And so that relates to over 7 million descendants of people who were involved in the independence of America. It's kind of the short. But the most, while it's really cool and exciting, and I am guilty of this pleasure of proving somebody new, it's always best to take the path of least resistance.
You can just make one trip, take them.
And there are many ways to do that, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And having a strategic plan to get from point A to point B if you do want to prove somebody new. So the basic steps are fairly straightforward. You first have to identify somebody who has participated in the qualifying event, in this case, somebody who's considered a patriot of the American independence. You have to trace your lineage from the applicant to that patriot in this case. Verify source documents for linkage between the generations. And that's the part that really is so hard for people sometimes. You can have birth and death, marriage certificates and records all the way back. But if you can't show that John was the father of John Jr., that you've got to show that linkage. And that's the part that I think a lot of people forget about and get tripped up on. You have to verify source documents for all life events that are on the application. Complete the application. And then these are just some things that are kind of unique to DAR, so I won't get into that as much. But every date and place that you include on your application must require proof documents. So if I'll pick on you, I'm sorry, Larry Joe, but if you put your name as Larry Joe Reynolds, but you don't have a birth certificate that has that specifically, if it's Lawrence Joseph, that's how it's got to be on the application. It's got to match the source document. The first three generations must show a date and place for both birth and death. But after the third generation, from 4 on, you've got to be able to document one life event fully. So the date and the place. And there are ways to do to sort of work around that as well. But proof of linkage between all generations is required. And if it is somebody who is new, you have to show proof of service and residence in that area during the service. Previously approved application info can and should be used, but it has to be brought to current standards. One great example, the DAR was started in 1890, and many of these women wanted to document and honor their descent from patriots they were daughters of and granddaughters of, so they had firsthand knowledge. So their applications were basically, yes, I'm the granddaughter and of Nathaniel Reynolds, and you're in. So those who are joining beyond have to bring them up to current standards. So application basics, other life events, it's always preferable to have a government issued certificate, but as we all know, that's not always the case. You very often can't, I've got Southern Heritage and there's a lot of burned counties and city clerks, there's missing records. So there are ways around and ways to source what you put on your applications. You can use one certificate if it has multiple life events. For instance, if a death certificate has the birth, the names of their parents and a wife, though that one certificate can be used for all of those things. Obituaries are well regarded in the DAR application process because they are considered firsthand knowledge. The person who was providing that information probably knew the person who passed. Censuses, but it must include their name and their relationship. You can't just say there was a tick mark for a child under the age of 5 that was a male, and so therefore that's my ancestor. It doesn't fly. Tombstone images or burial records, wills and probate records and land records, I just love. It can be a great source, Bible records and newspaper articles. Always prioritize the line through which you are tracing your descent and then fill in for the spouse because they're a little bit more forgiving on that side of it. One big change in DAR is that you are the biological child of, and so marriage records are optional at this point. Certainly great if you want to document place and and residence, etc. But marriage records are not required for DAR applications. And it's okay to use circa, pre, ante, buried, and resided if you don't have a specific date of death, sort of last known, is okay to use. But you've got to be able to back it up somehow. So in this case, to identify a patriot, you really should start looking with, unfortunately, with males born in this time frame, living in one of the original 13 colonies between the dates of the revolution. But there's always exceptions. My oldest verified patriot was born in 1702. I had people who provided service who were living in Canada. So the DAR genealogical records and the SAR databases are great resources. If you want to prove a new patriot, you will have to show proof of service and proof of residency. And while most people think of a DAR patriot as somebody who had military service, and certainly that's the bulk of what people are honored for, there are also many other ways that contributions are recognized. Civil service, patriotic service, prisoner of war, a signer of the Declaration of Independence. If your ancestor was a I don't know, a town clerk during that period of time, they would qualify. And sometimes you need a strategic plan to get there, and you might need to write an analysis. So before I get there, I just thought, would it be helpful to just sort of see the genealogical records on the DAR website? Because I can hop on over there and just give you a really quick, they're free and available. Okay.
I look at them all the time. Thank you.
Okay, so let me just see if I can hop over. Anyone can log into dar.org. There is more information available to members that are kind of more specific to the day in and day out of running your chapter. But so if you click on genealogy, and then you'll see under the genealogical research system, there's lots of ways you can search for ancestors, for members, and descendants. And these are, again, all free and available to the public. So just clicking on ancestor search, that would be anyone who has been recognized as a patriot. You'll see that if we put in Reynolds, there are 188 people who have already been recognized with the last name Reynolds for service during the Revolutionary War. It helps to narrow that search sometimes. So I'm going to be speaking to you about, Nathaniel. If I could walk and chew gum, that would be great. And you'll see that there are 7. You can filter it further by state, etc. But the one I'm going to be speaking to you about today is the one that I originally joined DAR on, Nathaniel Reynolds. He is a descendant from the Robert and Mary line in Boston. I like to say he had such a colorful life, and he was so adventurous. I've only gone 30 miles from the city of Boston. So my experience pales by his. So the information you can see readily are just sort of where he was born, where he died, what his service was, and a short description, his residence, and then any spouses. And then you'll see a list of all of the people who have applied based on Nathaniel's service, and their child and that child's spouse. Now, all of these records have a little bit more information that you can click on to kind of see how you might connect with them. And you can also purchase all of their application and source documents. And they're usually pretty affordable, $10 to $20. Fortunately, you don't always know what you're getting for that, but you get it delivered pretty. So I wouldn't go clicking on each and every one of these. But if you have a desire to join and you want to know a little bit more about it. The other thing that's helpful, and I'll just choose mine for security purposes here. You can click here and it will show you basically the application less anyone who's living or who has the propensity to be alive. So this again is a free resource. So you can see kind of how I connected in and see if you have any connection along the way. Again, another really helpful way to build out your genealogy if you are related in some way. It tells you whether there are supporting documents available or not. So that's just some of the research help that's available. They're also in the process of digitizing a lot of records under the GRC, things like payroll and Bible records. Again, free resource. So I feel like I'm plugging DAR and that's not my intent. Sorry. So let me get back to my case in particular.
Diane, I have a question.
Sure.
How do I get, I'm interested in joining the DAR. How do I get an application?
You can fill out, there's a form on the website of interest, and they'll connect you with your local, the chapter that's closest to you. Or I can email you a copy of the application if you just wanted to take a look at it. But most registrars are really super helpful in helping you fill out the application. Like it's not just, here's your application, good luck and see me when you're done kind of a thing.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm originally from Maine, and I'm also descended from Robert, and Nathaniel happens to be one of my ancestors. So you and I are, I think, cousins.
Yeah, so you'll be able to join really easy. And I have another exciting thing to share with you in a little bit. It's kind of a secret. As I mentioned, I joined on Nathaniel, and this would be me, and this is my lineage. And that's where we're going up to generation 9. It can seem daunting, but understanding that we're going to prioritize the line that it goes through. So I don't know if you can see these red boxes. These are the must-have connections. And then, of course, the spouses. So you can really kind of forget about all the rest of your ancestry. You've just got to kind of trace that line. In my case, I was able to connect at generation 6. So I really only needed to source documents for these 9 individuals. I don't know why I thought they would all come. Oops, sorry. Go back. And so he was already, his service and residence were already approved. All the source documents were already in place. So I really only had to get those up to that point, and I had them already. So that was pretty easy. Those of us who descend from Nathaniel have likely heard the story of his colorful life. He started out as a cordwainer in Marblehead. He turned settler and farmer, sea captain. He was a Revolutionary War hero, pirateer, and then, of course, the jilted lover whose heart he broke twice. In her book, Marion Reynolds said that she felt his was the most tragic and romantic story in the entire book. And so I'd always been sort of like, wow, this is very cool. But what about his wife, Lydia? she's just sort of a footnote in many of the stories. And the more I dug, the more intrigued I was. And I felt like her story needed to be told. Oops, let me get past all this. As you can see, so let's highlight Lydia for a little bit. Lydia was also descendant, like Nathaniel, from many prominent early New England settlers, early magistrates, the governor of the colony of Rhode Island and the Providence plantations, a major, but again, it was a wife, Lydia, and they had, this many children. She was born in Beverly, Massachusetts, which is in Essex County. She was the 7th of 10 children born to, and I always struggle with pronouncing this, Lydia Raymond and Jemima Meekum. Her father descended from early settlers in Essex County, including very prominent families in Beverly, the Scruggs, the Woodburys, and the Dodges, in addition to the Raymonds. He died in 1747 when Lydia was just 11 years old. Settlement of his estate included expenses for sicknesses and coffins and burial for 3 members of the household. So it sounds as if they may have been part of the influenza, or at least it was a very sad and tragic time. She lost at least 2 of her siblings, in addition to her father. And then her mom was reported to have been born in Newport, Rhode Island, which, doesn't seem very far away, but for those of us who do New England research, that it just didn't seem plausible to me. And I wondered how she was born in Newport, Rhode Island, and then 22 years later ended up in Beverly, Massachusetts, when she was married. And so I discovered that Lydia's mother was in fact born in Newport. She was the daughter of Jeremiah Meekum and his wife, Patience Bliss. And then I uncovered the gruesome details of the murder of her mother, Patience, and Patience's sister, Content, in 1715, that was in fact committed by her father. It was a brutal crime. It was widely reported throughout New England, and many of the early reverends used it as sermons, including, and there's a very famous one, and I can send you a link to it in the chat, delivered by Reverend William Cooper at the Brattle Street Church in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Shortly after the murder, Jeremiah was hanged and his corpse ordered to be set in iron gibbets in Newport. So that might explain why that wasn't something we all talked about or knew about. So it was supposed that Jemima and her siblings were taken in by her grandparents, Major John Bliss, and his wife Damaris, the daughter of the governor, who was named Benedict Arnold. Not that one, but close, certainly related. And that when the major died in 1717, Jemima and her brother John came under the care of their uncle, James Meekum, who was then living in Beverly. So that solved that problem for me. That's where she met and married at the age of 22. And this is the homestead. It still stands and actually just sold a few years ago. I was really disappointed to learn that. I would have certainly been one of those people that went to the open house. And so this is just sort of, this is Lydia's father's gravestone. He died when she was 11 years old. She was one of at least 6 children who were appointed under a guardian, Peter Woodbury, their uncle, in 1749, when her mother married Jacob Estey, her second husband. Jemima was again widowed in 1751, and we presume Lydia was living in her household when she met the local cordwainer Nathaniel Reynolds, who she married on the 8th of October, 1753, just months after he jilted Mary Chapel on their wedding day. And that's the story that you'll read all about. and their son Benjamin was born a year later, and their daughter Mary in 1757, all in Beverly. We next find that Lydia and Nathaniel sell their property that she had inherited as part of her father's estate and moved to Newport, Rhode Island. I had never known that. And so they were living there for some time until 1760, when a land grant program was launched. It was designed to repopulate the area following the expulsion of the Acadians in Nova Scotia. And so Lydia and Nathaniel and their two children hopped on board. And so it's a really tattered one, but I was able to see the actual proclamation for this land grant. Over 14,000 New Englanders took advantage of this program and moved up to Nova Scotia. And this is the area primarily that they settled into. He was given a land grant in 1764, and then by 1765, he relocated to Amherst, which wasn't far, but it was so up in here near, they had been further north and then they came down a little bit. And in the 1770 census, they were living there. They were living in Amherst in 1772. We know that they had, by the census records, that they had at least 5 more children, the last being Eunice, who was born in 1776. Now, keep in mind that the population, oops, sorry. Let me go back. Sorry.
Diane, excuse me, I hate to jump in. We have 4 minutes left till we transition to our next topic. So I wanted to give you a 4-minute warning.
Sure, thank you. So keeping in mind that many of the New Englanders were now living there, it's not unusual to believe that they would also have similar sentiments and participate in the revolution. And so Nathaniel and a few of his friends, 180 soldiers, got together and launched a siege on the fort there. They were quickly taken over by the British troops, and the British were pretty brutal in the retaliation. They chased all of the soldiers away or captured who they could. They burned the homes of anyone who was remaining, captured their wives and children. In fact, over 100 people were held captive for over 2 years, including Lydia and 10 of her children. And so I'm in the process. I have been able to obtain original documents, both at the Nova Scotia Archives and Massachusetts State Archives. If you keep in mind that Massachusetts land extended pretty far away. And so it's through that evidence that I recently proved Lydia as an ancestor through DAR as well. And that just proving her service was all that was necessary to do that. And so I'd love to talk a little bit more about that experience. I'm actually researching it now. She submitted a memorial to the Nova Scotia magistrates begging for her release 2 years later. And so I'm trying to obtain a copy of that, and will gladly share it as soon as I find it. And so that's my story. And I hope that you found it interesting. Any questions?
Diane,
This is-
thank you. That was very interesting and
Richard.
very informative. And there may well be people that would have questions about applying, etc. And perhaps if it'd be okay, I can offer that if folks would like to reach out to Diane, feel free to be in touch with me, or she may leave her contact info in the chat if she desires. Diane, thank you for taking the time to introduce us to DAR and applying. I'm trying to keep a schedule, so I will transition to the next topic. And if folks do have questions, perhaps we can take those during our lunch break if Diane is still around at that time. Okay, so I'd like to close off this recording